Okay, so I'm sharing the screen. Yes, I'm reading the fifth canto. So there is a nice section on King Raghava and Jad Bharat section. So, yeah, Jad Bharat is just Raghava. Yes. From text 11 we'll read. Jnanam vishuddham paramarthamekam anantaram tva abahir satyam pratyak prashantam bhagavat shabda shamjam yad vasudevam kavayo vadanti. What then is the ultimate truth? The answer is that non-dual knowledge is the ultimate truth. It is devoid of the contamination of material qualities. It gives us liberation. It is the one without a second, all-pervading and beyond imagination. The first realization of that knowledge is Brahman. Then Paramatma, the super soul, is realized by the yogis who try to see him without grievance. This is the second stage of realization. The one without a second, all-pervading and beyond imagination. Finally, full realization of the same supreme knowledge is realized in the supreme person. All learned scholars describe the supreme person as Vasudeva, the cause of Brahman, Paramatma, and others. Purport. In Chaitanya Charitamrita it is said, Yat Advaitam Brahmopanishadi Tad Api Aschatanubha. The impersonal Brahman effulgence of the absolute truth considers the body rays of the supreme personality of Godhead. Your call has been forwarded to voice. The impersonal Brahman effulgence of the absolute truth considers the body rays of the supreme personality of Godhead. Ya Atma Antaryami Purusha Itoso Shama Vibhavaha. What is known as Atma and Antaryami, the super soul, is but an expansion of the supreme personality of Godhead. Shadashwarya Purno Hiyahi Bhagavan Sa Swayam Ayam. What is described as the supreme personality of Godhead, complete with all its opulence, is Vasudev. Now, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not different from him. Great learned scholars and philosophers accept this after many, many births. Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. The wise man can understand that ultimately Vasudeva Krishna is the cause of Brahman and Paramatma, the super soul. Thus, Vasudeva is Sarva Karana Karanam, cause of all causes. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. The real tattva, the absolute truth, is Bhagavan, but due to incomplete realization of the absolute truth, people sometimes describe the same Vishnu as impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma. The real tattva, absolute truth, is Bhagavan, but due to incomplete realization of the absolute truth, people sometimes describe the same Vishnu as impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma. Vadanti tattvat vidas tattvam yadyanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdate. From the very beginning, Srimad Bhagavatam says, Satyam param dhimahi. We meditate on the supreme truth. The supreme truth is explained here as Jnanam Vishuddham Satyam. The absolute truth is devoid of material contamination and is transcendent to the material qualities. It gives all spiritual success, liberation from this material world. The supreme truth is explained here as Jnanam Vishuddham Satyam. The absolute truth is devoid of material contamination and is transcendent to the material qualities. It gives all spiritual success and liberation from this material world. The supreme absolute truth is Krishna, Vasudeva. There is no difference between Krishna's inner self and outward body. Krishna is Purna, the complete whole. There is no distinction between his body and soul as there is between ours. Sometimes the so-called scholars, not knowing the constitutional position of Krishna, mislead people by saying that the Krishna within is different from the Krishna without. When Krishna says, Manmana bhav madbhakto madhyadimam namaskuru, so-called scholars advise the reader that it is not the person to whom we must surrender, but the Krishna within. So-called scholars, Mayavadis, cannot understand Krishna with their poor fund of knowledge. One should therefore approach an authorized person to understand Krishna. The spiritual master has actually seen Krishna, therefore he can explain him properly. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashtena sevaya upadeshanti te jnanam jnanina sattva darshinaha. Without approaching an authorized person, one cannot understand Krishna. And then text 12. Rahugune tapasa nayati na chejaya nirvarpanad grihadva na chandasa naiva jalagni surya vina mahapadarajo vishekam. Then Jaghat is saying, my dear King Raghuna, unless one has the opportunity to smear his entire body with the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees, one cannot realize the absolute truth. One cannot realize the absolute truth simply by observing celibacy, brahmacharya, strictly following the rules and regulations of householder life, leaving home as vanprastha, accepting sannyas, or undergoing severe penances in winter by keeping oneself submerged in water, or surrounding oneself in summer by fire and the scorching heat of the sun. There are many other processes to understand the absolute truth, but the absolute truth is only revealed to one who has attained the mercy of a great devotee. Actual knowledge of transcendental bliss can be bestowed upon anyone by a pure devotee. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakto. One cannot attain the perfection of spiritual life simply by following the directions of the Vedas. One has to approach a pure devotee. See, actual knowledge of transcendental bliss can be bestowed by a pure devotee. So one cannot attain the perfection of spiritual life simply by following the directions of the Vedas, because one may misinterpret it. One has to approach a pure devotee. Anyabhilasita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam. By the grace of such a devotee, one can understand the absolute truth, Krishna, and one's relationship with him. A materialistic person sometimes thinks that simply by executing pious activities and remaining at home, one can understand the absolute truth. That is denied in this verse. Nor can one understand the absolute truth simply by observing the rules and regulations of brahmacharya, celibacy. One only has to serve the pure devotee. That will help one understand the absolute truth without fail. यत्रोत्तम श्लोक गुणानुवादा प्रस्तूयते ग्राम्य कथा विघातः निषेव्य पाणो नुदिनं मुमुक्षोर्मति सतीं यच्छति वासुदेवे. Who are the pure devotees mentioned here? In an assembly of pure devotees, there is no question of discussing material subjects like politics and sociology. In an assembly of pure devotees, there is discussion only of the qualities, forms, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality Godhead. He is praised and worshipped with full attention in the association of pure devotees by constantly hearing such topics respectfully. Even a person who wants to merge into the existence of the absolute truth abandons this idea and gradually becomes attached to the service of Vasudeva. The symptoms of pure devotees are described in this verse. The pure devotee is never interested in material topics. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has strictly prohibited his devotees to talk about worldly matters. Gramme varta naka hibe. One should not indulge in talking unnecessarily about news of the material world. One should not waste time in this way. This is a very important feature in the life of a devotee. A devotee has no other ambition than to serve Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Krishna conscious movement was started to engage people 24 hours daily in the service of the Lord and in His glorification. The students in this institution engage in the cultivation of Krishna consciousness from 5 in the morning to 10 at night. They actually have no opportunity to waste their time unnecessarily by discussing politics, sociology, and current events. These will go their own way. A devotee is concerned only with serving Krishna positively and seriously. Amazing, no? These will go on their own way. Devotees will keep serving Krishna. Aham pura bharato nama raja vimukta drishta sita sangramandha aradhanam bhagavat ihamano mrigo bhavam mriga sangadathartha. Then he says about his previous birth. See what he's saying. In my previous birth, I was known as Maharaj Bharat. I attained perfection by becoming completely detached from material activities. Through direct experience and through indirect experience, I received understanding from the Vedas. I was fully engaged in the service of the Lord, but due to my misfortune, I became very affectionate to a small deer. So much that I neglected my spiritual duties. Due to my deep affection for the deer, in my next life, I had to accept the body of a deer. Purport. The incident here described is very significant. In a previous life, it is stated, Vina Mahatpadrajo Vishekam. One cannot attain perfection without smearing the dust of the lotus feet of an exalted devotee on his head. If one follows the orders of the spiritual master, there is no question of falling down. As soon as a foolish disciple tries to overtake his spiritual master and becomes ambitious to occupy his post, he immediately falls down. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado yasya prasadan nagati kutopi. If the spiritual master is considered an ordinary man, the disciple surely loses his chance to advance further. Despite a very rigid life in devotional service, Bharat Maharaj did not consult a spiritual master when he became overly attached to a deer. Consequently, he became strongly attached to the deer and forgetting his spiritual routine, he fell down. So it's connecting that we need the spiritual master. We need the association of spiritual master and senior Vaishnava. Without that, one can be challenged. So when always follow the orders of the spiritual master, there is no question of falling down. As soon as fully disciple tries to overtake his spiritual master and becomes ambitious to occupy his post, immediately falls down. Amazing, no? Samam smriti mrgadeha pivira krishnarchana prabhavano jahati ato aham janasangada sango vishankamano vivrittascharami. My dear heroic king, due to my past sincere service to the Lord, I could remember everything of my past life, even while in the body of a deer. Yeah, so I could remember everything of his previous life because of well in the body of river also. Because I'm aware of the fall down in my past life, I always keep myself separate from the association of ordinary men. Being afraid of their bad materialistic association, I wander alone unnoticed by others. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Salpamapi asya dharmasya. It is certainly a great fall to go from human life to animal life. But in case of Bharat Maharaj or any devotee, devotional service to the Lord never goes in vain. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, yam yam vapi smaran bhavan teti ante kalayoram. At the time of death, by nature's law, the mind is absorbed in a certain type of thinking. This may lead one to animal life, yet for a devotee there is no loss. Even though Bharat Maharaj received the body of a deer, he did not forget his position. Consequently, in the body of a deer, he was very careful to remember the cause of his fall down. As a result, he was given a chance to be born in a family of very pure Brahmanas. Thus, his service to the Lord never went in vain. तस्मान्नरो संग सुसंग जात ज्ञानासिनेह विक्रमोह हरिम तदीया कथन श्रुताभ्याम लब्धा स्मृतिर्यात्यति पारमद्भनः. Simply by giving up the association of worldly people and associating with exalted devotees, anyone can attain perfection of knowledge. These two things are required. Giving up the association of worldly people and associating with exalted devotees. Anyone can attain perfection of knowledge. And with the sword of knowledge can cut to pieces the illusory association within this material body. To the association of devotees, one can engage in the service of the Lord by hearing and chanting, Shavanam Kirtanam. Thus, one can receive his dormant Krishna consciousness and sticking to the cultivation of Krishna consciousness, return home back to Godhead even in this life. So, the association of devotees, one can engage in the service of the Lord by hearing and chanting. Thus, one can revive his dormant Krishna consciousness and sticking to the cultivation of Krishna consciousness, return home back to Godhead even in this life. Purport. To become liberated from material bondage, one must give up the association of worldly people and accept the association of devotees. Positive and negative processes are mentioned in this regard. Through the association of devotees, one develops Krishna consciousness, which is dormant within. This Krishna consciousness movement is giving this chance to everyone. We are giving shelter to everyone who is serious about progressing in Krishna consciousness. We arrange for their lodging and board. We arrange for the lodging and board. So that they can peacefully cultivate Krishna consciousness and return home back to Godhead even in this life. If you want, you can have lodging and board for the whole life. You can give. Just engage in Krishna consciousness, go back to God. If you're ready. No need to do so many things. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the fifth canto, 12th chapter Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled the conversation between Maharaj Raghuna and Jadbharata. Further talk between Raghuna and Jadbharata. The Brahmana Jadbharata very kind to King Raghuna, and to disassociate him from the material world, he spoke figuratively of the forest of the material world. Explained that this material world is like a great forest in which one becomes entangled due to association with material life. In this forest, there are plunderers, the six senses, as well as carnivorous animals like jackals, wolves, and the lions, wives, children, and other relatives, who are always anxious to suck the blood from the head of the family. The forest plunderers and the carnivorous blood-sucking animals combine to exploit the energy of man within this material world. In this forest, there is also a black hole covered by grass into which one may fall. Coming into the forest and being captivated by so many material attractions, one identifies himself with this material world, society, friendship, love, and family. Having lost the path and not knowing where to go, being harassed by animals and birds, one is also victimized by many desires. Thus, one works very hard within the forest and wanders here and there. He becomes captivated by temporary happiness and becomes aggrieved by so-called distress. Actually, one simply suffers in the forest from the so-called happiness and distress. Sometimes is attacked by a snake, deep sleep. The snake is completely deep sleep. And due to the snake bite, he loses consciousness and becomes puzzled and bewildered about discharging his duty. Sometimes he is attracted by women other than his wife, and thus he thinks he enjoys extramarital love with another woman. And thus be things. He enjoys. He is attracted by various diseases, by lamentation, and by summer and winter. Thus, one within the forest of the material world suffers the pains of material existence, expecting to become happy. The living entity changes his position from one place to another, but actually, materialistic person within the material world is never happy. Being constantly engaged in materialistic activity is always disturbed. He forgets that one day he has to die. Although he suffers severely, being illusioned by the material energy, he still hankers after material happiness. Although he suffers severely, being illusioned by the material energy, he still hankers after material happiness. In this way, he completely forgets his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Very powerful. No? By hearing this from Jadbharat, Maharaj Raghuna revived his Krishna consciousness and thus benefited from Jadbharata's association. He could understand that his illusion was over, and he begged pardon from Jadbharat for his misbehavior. All this was told to Maharaj Parikshit by Sukdev Goswami. ब्राह्मणाच दुरत्यये धनंजया निवेशितो रजस्तम सत्व विभक्त कर्मद्रक स एष सार्थोरथ परः परिभ्रमं भवान्तविं याति न शर्म विन्दति. Jadbharata, who had fully realized Brahman, continued, "My dear King Raghuna, the living entity wanders on the path of the material world, which is very difficult for him to traverse, and he accepts repeated birth and death. Being captivated by the material world under the influence of the three modes of material nature, Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, and Tamoguna, the living entity can see only the three fruits of activities under the spell of material nature. These fruits are auspicious, inauspicious, and mixed. He thus becomes attached to religion, economic development, sense gratification, and the monastic theory of liberation, merging with the Supreme. He works very hard day and night, exactly like a merchant who enters a forest to acquire some riches, some articles to sell later for profit. However, he cannot really achieve happiness within this material world. Purport. One can very easily understand how difficult and insurmountable the path of sense gratification is, not knowing what the path of sense gratification is, one becomes implicated in the repetition of births and accepts different types of bodies again and again. Thus, one suffers in material existence. In this life, one may think that he is very happy, being an American, Indian, Englishman, or German. But in next life, one has to accept another body among 84 lakh species. The next body has to be immediately accepted according to karma. One will be forced to accept a certain type of body. And protesting will not help. That is the essential law of nature. Due to the living entity's ignorance of this his eternal blissful life, he becomes attracted to material activities under the spell of Maya. In this world, he can never experience happiness. Yet he works very hard to do so. Somebody was telling me that how he is so fortunate in this life, he is blessed with his understanding of Krishna or something like that. Daniel Bros. So it says, yet he works very hard. This is called Maya. In this material, he can never, in this material world, he can never experience happiness. See? This material can never experience happiness, yet he works very hard to do so. This is called Maya. So just think about it. So much you're working hard, you're searching for job, doing a job, doing this, doing that, ultimately, so that there is some feeling that, oh, we'll become settled and happy. But it's no happiness. No one can never experience happiness. But it's working so hard, you see. Maya,
in this world, we can only experience happiness through Krishna consciousness.
Yes, that's the only business to cultivate Krishna consciousness. That's the only business. It's a matter of understanding. If we don't understand, then we complicate our life. And we can give justification. Okay. Yasyamime chandara deva dasyavaha sartham vilupanti kunaya kambalat. Yeah, we have to cultivate Krishna in this life. That's the main important things. All other things has to revolve around that. That's the main business to cultivate Krishna. Gomaya vo yatra haranti sartikam pramattama vishayathoranam vrikaha. Walking Raghuna in this forest of material existence, there are 6 very powerful plunderers. When the conditions will enter the forest to acquire some material gain, the 6 plunderers misguide him. Thus, the conditioned merchant does not know how to spend his money and is taken away by these plunderers. Like tigers, jackals, and other ferocious animals in the forest that are ready to take away a lamb from the custody of his protector, the wife and children enter the heart of the merchant. And plunder him in so many ways. Purport. In the forest, there are many plunderers, dacoits, jackals, tigers. Jackals are compared to one's wife and children. In the dead of night, jackals cry very loudly. And similarly, one's wife and children in this material world also cry like jackals. The children say, Father, this is wanted. Give me this. I am your dear son. Or the wife says, I am your dear wife. Please give me this. This is now needed. This is now needed. Like that. In this way, one is plundered by the thieves in the forest. Not knowing the aim of human life, one is constantly being misguided. The aim of life is Vishnu. Vishnu. Everyone works very hard to earn money, but no one knows that his real self-interest is in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead of spending money for advancing the Krishna consciousness movement, one spends his hard-earned money on clubs, brothels, liquor, slaughterhouses, and so forth. Due to sinful activities, one becomes implicated in the process of transmigration and thus has to accept one body after another. Being thus absorbed in a distressed condition, one never attains happiness. प्रभूत वीरु तृणगुत्मनगरे कठोर दंशवर्दशकैरुपृतः क्वचित् गन्धर्वपुरं प्रपश्यति क्वचित् चाशूरयोलमुखग्रहम्. In this forest, there are dense bowers composed of thickets of bushes, grass, and creepers. In this bowers, the conditioned soul is always disturbed by cruelty, Cruelly biting mosquitoes envious people. Sometimes he sees an imaginary place in the forest, palace in the forest, and sometimes he is bewildered by seeing a fleeting fiend, F-I-N-D. And sometimes he is bewildered by seeing a fleeting fiend or ghost. It appears like a meter in the sky. Purport. The material world, no, the material world, household is actually a whole of fruitive activity. To earn a livelihood, one engages in different industries and trades, and sometimes one performs great sacrifices to go to higher planetary systems. Apart from this, at least everyone is engaged in earning livelihood in some profession or occupation. In these dealings, one has to meet many undesirable people, and their behavior is compared to the biting of mosquitoes. This creates very undesirable conditions. Even in the midst of these disturbances, one imagines that he is going to construct a grand house and live there permanently, although he knows that he cannot. Gold is compared to a quickly fleeting fiend, which appears like meteor in the sky. It displays itself for a moment and is then gone. Generally, karmis are attracted to gold and money, but these are compared here into ghosts and witches. निवासतो यद्यतिविनात्मबुद्धि ततस्ततो धावति भो अटव्याम् क्वचिद्बात्योत्थितपांशु धूम्रा दिशो न जानाति रजस्वलाक्षा. My dear king, the merchant on the forest path of the material world, his intelligence is victimized by some home, wealth, relatives, and so forth. Runs from one place to another in search of success. Sometimes his eyes are covered by the dust of a whirlwind. That is to say, in his lust, he is captivated by the beauty of his wife, especially during her menstrual period. Thus, his eyes are blinded and he cannot see where to go and what he is doing. Purport. It is said that household attraction resides in the wife because sex is the center of household life. Yan matunadigra medi sukam medocham. A materialistic person making his wife the center of attraction works very hard day and night. His only enjoyment in material life is sexual intercourse. Therefore, karmis are attracted to women as friends or wives. Indeed, they cannot work without sex. Under the circumstances, the wife is compared to a whirlwind, especially during her menstrual period. Those who strictly follow the rules and regulations of household life engage in sex only once a month at the end of the menstrual period. As one looks forward to this opportunity, his eyes are overwhelmed by the beauty of his wife. Thus, it is said that the whirlwind covers the eyes with dust. Such a lusty person does not know that all his material activities are being observed by different demigods, especially the sun god. And are being recorded for the karma of one's next body. Astrological calculations are called Jyotish Shastra because the Jyoti or refulgence in the material world comes from the different stars and planets. The science is called Jyotish, Jyotish Shastra, the science of the luminaries. By the calculations of Jyotis, our future is indicated. In other words, all the luminaries, the type of the stars, the sun and moon, witness activities of the conditioned soul. Thus, he is awarded a particular type of body. A lusty person whose eyes are covered by the dust or the whirlwind of material existence does not at all consider that his activities are being observed by different stars and planets and are being recorded. Thus, not knowing this, the individual soul commits all kinds of sinful activities for the satisfaction of the lusty desires.
मुझे भी नींद नहीं आया।
12:20 को गया दोस्तों, प्रोग्राम से लेट आया. Not knowing this, the conditioned soul commits all kinds of sinful activities for the satisfaction of the lusty desires. Then he says, Adrashya Jilli Shravana Karna Shula Ulu Kavagver Vyatitantaratma Apunya Vrikshan Shrayate Shudartito Marichito Yani Abhidavati Kvachit. Wandering In the forest of the material world, the conditioned soul sometimes hears an invisible cricket making harsh sounds, and his ears become very much aggrieved. Sometimes his heart is pained by the sounds of owls, which are just like the harsh words of his enemies. Sometimes he takes shelter of a tree that has no fruits or flowers. He approaches such a tree due to his strong appetite, and thus he suffers. He would like to acquire water, but he is simply illusioned by a mirage and he runs after it. Purport. It is in Srimad Bhagavatam it is said that Bhagavad philosophy is meant for people who are completely free from envy. Param Nirmat Sarana. This material world is full of envious people. Even within one's inner circle, there is so much backbiting, and this is compared to the sound vibration of a cricket in the forest. Yeah, one brother also becomes envious of the other brother, like so many things. One cannot see uh, the cricket, but one hears its sounds and thus becomes aggrieved. When one takes to Krishna consciousness, one always hears unpalatable words from relatives. This is the nature of the world. One cannot avoid mental distress due to the backbiting of envious people. Being very much aggrieved, sometimes one goes to a sinful person for help. But he has no means to help because he has no intelligence. Thus the living entity is disappointed. This is like running water after a mirage in the desert in an effort to find water. Such activities do not produce any tangible result. Due to being directed by the illusory energy, conditioned soul suffers in so many ways. क्वचिद्वितोया सरितोऽभियाति परस्परं चालशते निरन्धः आसाद्य दावं क्वचिदुत्कृतप्तो निर्विद्यते क्वचयक्षैर्हतासु. Sometimes the conditioned soul jumps into a shallow river on being short of food grains or being short of food. So he jumps into or being short of food grains, he goes to beg food from people who are not at all charitable. Sometimes he suffers from the burning heat of household life, which is like forest fire, and sometimes he becomes sad to have his wealth, which is as dear as life, plundered by kings in the name of heavy income taxes. Acha, his health, taxes, I guess, he becomes sad. Purport. When one is hot due to the scorching sun, one sometimes jumps into a river to gain relief. However, if the river is almost dried up and the water is too shallow, one may break his bones by jumping in. The conditioned soul is always experiencing miserable conditions. Sometimes his efforts to get help from friends are exactly like jumping into a dry river. By such actions, he does not derive any benefit. He only breaks his bones. Sometimes suffering from a shortage of food, one may go to a person who is neither able to give charity nor willing to do so. Sometimes one is stationed in household life, which is compared to a forest fire. Samsara Davan and Rupa. When a man is heavily taxed by the government, he becomes very sad. Heavy taxation obliges one to hide his income. When a man is heavily taxed by the government, he becomes very sad. Heavy taxation obliges one to hide his income. But despite this endeavor, the government agents are often so vigilant and strong that they take all the money anyway. And the conditions will become very much aggrieved. He becomes very sad. Heavy taxation obliges him to hide his income. But despite this endeavor, the government agents are often so vigilant and strong that they take all the money anyway. Thus, people are trying to become happy within this material world, but this is like trying to be happy in the forest fire. No one need to go to a forest to set it ablaze. Fire takes place automatically. Similarly, no one wants to be unhappy in family life or worldly life. But by the laws of nature, unhappiness and distress are forced upon everyone. To become dependent on another for one's maintenance is very degrading. Therefore, according to Vedic systems, everyone should live independently. Only the Shudras are unable to live independently. They are obliged to serve someone for maintenance. Nowadays, everybody is dependent on somebody. So everybody is living like a Shudra life. They are obliged to serve someone for maintenance. It is said in the Shastras, Kalau Shudra Sambhava, in this age of Kali. Everyone is dependent on another's mercy for maintenance of the body. Therefore, everyone is classified as a Shudra. In 12th canto. हाँ क्या
कोई बचा ही नहीं पाया
बचा
बचा ही नहीं पाएगा information.
No, from this context.
Yeah, no, I can agree, but for anyone else, it's too difficult for them to accept that.
In the 12th Kanto Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that in Kalyuga, the government will levy taxes without reciprocally benefiting the citizens. Anavrishya vinakshanti durbiksha karapidita. In this age, there will also be a shortage of rain. Therefore, a scarcity of food will arise, and the citizens will be very much harassed by government taxation. In this way, the citizens will abandon their attempts to lead a peaceful life and will leave their homes and hearths and go to the forest in sheer disappointment. Eventually, it will happen. Shurairhitasva kvacha nirvinna cheta shochan muyyan upayati kashmalam kvachik chagandharvapuram parvishtraha pramodate nivrittavan muhuratam. Sometimes being defeated or plundered by a superior powerful agent, a living entity loses all his possessions. He then becomes very morose and lamenting their loss, he sometimes becomes unconscious. Sometimes he imagines a great palatial city in which he desires to live happily with his family members and riches. He thinks himself fully satisfied if this is possible. But such so-called happiness continues only for a moment. But what the word Gandharva is very significant in this word. Sometimes in the forest, a very big castle appears. It is called a castle in the air. Actually, this castle does not exist anywhere but in one's imagination. This is called Gandharapura. In the material forest, the conditions will sometimes contemplate great castles and skyscrapers, and he wastes his energy for such things, hoping to live in them very peacefully with his family forever. However, the laws of nature do not allow this. When he enters such castles, he temporarily thinks that he is very happy, even though his happiness is impermanent. His happiness may last for a few years, but because of the owner of the castle, he has to leave the castle at the time of death. Everything is eventually lost. This is a way of worldly transactions. Such happiness is described by Vidyapati as the happiness one derives upon seeing a drop of water in the desert. The desert is heated by scorching sunshine, and if we want to reduce the desert temperature, we need huge amounts of water, millions and millions of gallons. What effect will one drop have? Water certainly has value, but one drop of water cannot reduce the heat of the desert. In this material world, everyone is ambitious, but the heat is very scorching. The desert is heated by scorching sun, and if one wants to reduce the desert temperature, we need huge amounts of water, millions and millions of gallons. What effect will one drop have? Water certainly has value, but one drop of water cannot reduce the heat of the desert. In this material world, everyone is ambitious, but the heat is very scorching. What will an imaginary castle in the air do to help? Vidyapati has therefore sung Tatala Saikate Varibindu Sama Sutamita Ramani Samaje. The happiness of family life, friends, and society is compared to a drop of water in the scorching desert. The entire material world is busy trying to attain happiness because happiness is the prerogative of the living being. Unfortunately, due to falling in contact with the material world, the living entity simply struggles for existence. Even if one becomes happy for a while, a very powerful enemy may plunder everything. There are many instances in which big businessmen suddenly become paupers in the street. Yet the nature of material existence is such that foolish people are attracted to these Yet the nature of the material existence is such that foolish people are attracted to these transactions, and they forget the real business of self-realization. Got it? No? Got it? You got beautiful, powerful. अरे एकदम शार्प बजा दिया सन शार्प चलन पचित कंटक सरकांगरे गारक्षे विमन विवासते पदे पदे भयंतर वही नारिता कुटुंबिका कृदंति न वही जनया. Sometimes a merchant in the forest wants to climb the hills and mountains, but due to insufficient footwear, his feet are pricked by small stone fragments and by thorns on the mountain. Being pricked by them, he becomes very aggravated. Sometimes the person who is very attached to his family becomes overrun with hunger, and due to his miserable condition, he becomes furious with his family members. Okay, let us go further.